All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Fernanda, and I'm part of the Tonantzin Society. I will be your moderator today. Welcome every single one of you in our panel and every single one of you tuning in. We are grateful to have your time and your attention. A todos, una gran bienvenida. Whether we accept a responsibility to our planet or not, we all affect it every single day. I'm hopeful that as we listen to our panelists, a truth they speak will push us further to protect our Earth and all inhabitants. We witness a part of your journey with each one of you in the film. Can you please introduce yourself and your community to us? And whoever wants to get started can go ahead and do so.
I don't know if I want to let Casey Camp go first because she's the elder, but I could go first if we need a little bit more time. But
go ahead, Edith.
I'm just so happy to see Casey. And I know that, like, you know, the internet, all the crazy things, you know, that make this possible sometimes lags. And, you know, it's just so good to get to see your face. And at some point, you know, our connection will match this whole internet. Yeah, my name is Judith Azaret Nieto. I grew up in the community of Manchester, as you saw in the film, but I also am a language justice worker. I work in community, and I'm really excited to be here today, but I'm also really tired. It's been a long day today, and, you know, dealing with all of these things, pandemic-wise, family members getting struck by COVID, it takes a lot out of you. So I'm going to be honest and coming to you with that on my mind right now. So bear with me. But I'm really excited to be here tonight. Really honored to get to spend some virtual time with Casey and get to see your awesome background, because it always looks like you're radiating. And it, you know, I kind of like got this idea. I'm in my little cousin's bedroom right now in Houston with my family, because I came home and this reminded me of you. So I was like, can I go sit in your room today? I want to radiate. So it's really good to see you all. To be on this virtual hangout with you all tonight.
I'll go ahead. Judith, just accept a big hug. I'm just loving you so much. Can't wait to have that be real. Yeah. It's always good to hear and see you. And, you know, throw off the tired. Let it go for now. Right behind you is two sources of power, the Father, Son, and the Moon Mother, the sacred ocean. They're going to hold you up, huh? All right. Deep breath, and love you. Yeah. Brian, it's good to see you. My young one, my young nephew. Always happy to see you. Fernanda, good to meet you. Clement, is he there, or are we just looking at a virtual him?
It's
always
actually
good to be
me.
around him.
It's actually, can you see me, Casey?
Well, hello, beautiful.
Hi, yeah, I'm using Clement's name.
I can see you, happy woman.
Yeah, I'm not officially part of the panel, but I do want to say hello. I'll be listening, and if there's any issues, I'll be here to help. That's my part tonight. Thank you for saying hi.
Thank you. You look awesome. And
thank you. You do too.
Yeah, you look wonderful as usual.
Oh, I love you guys.
And for our love you. Our viewers who are here, thank you for taking the journey with us. It's a powerful journey that is still happening. Now, many times you feel like once you wrap up a film, it's done. But this is a living entity that we participated in and still participate in. I'm Ponca. That means sacred head in our language. I'm in north central Oklahoma, and this occupied territory of Turtle Island. Our people, the Ponca, are originally from Nebraska, and we were forcibly removed here. And we too are dealing with COVID here, Judith. It struck our community in a devastating way. You know, we're losing some of our, any of our people are precious, as you know, but some are the wisdom keepers that are being taken right now, and it feels too soon. So I pray for safety for all of you and all of us together, that with our relatives, in whatever form they are, we're going to find some balance. And maybe tonight's the start of that. Love you all. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your evening.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. My name is Brian Parras, and I'm here in Houston, Texas. And yeah, feeling a little tired today. Also, the whole situation with like 3 hurricanes in the last month and a half, 2 months. Been in quarantine for a couple of weeks, and we just had a huge flare, like literally in between where Judith and I grew up, that burned for over 24 hours. So just same old, and with the added pressures of living in a pandemic, and with the elections very much a part of our consciousness, and all the suffering happening right now across the country and the globe, and thinking of one of our brother warriors that Jaime mentioned in the chat. If you were watching the film on the platform, Cecil Corbin, who was a big part of organization in New York called We Act, and we lost him yesterday. So just very much mindful of our relatives and our warriors who have been part of the struggle for many decades, and just want to send some prayers and love to his family and all the folks that work with him, and many that I know, Casey, Judith, myself, and others at Tonantzin Society, and the folks watching, if you have lost someone from COVID, or just the stress, right, of the times, or become homeless from the fires, hurricanes, or all of the different things that are happening. Yeah, just thinking of you, praying for you. Omida.
Thank you again. It's really enriching for us to count on your presence right now. So one of the intentions of this conversation is to continue decolonizing our language with how we frame Indigenous peoples. I asked how you were doing to talk about your communities, and clearly struggles came out, but I want to make sure that we acknowledge the resiliency of our people and the wisdom that has been guiding our communities for hundreds of years. With that, I want to take our attention back to the film, and we'll start with the title. Can we hear what the prophecy of the eagle and the condor has meant in each one of your lives? Casey, if we can begin with you, that would be lovely.
Thank you. I'm just going to burn a little bit of cedar here and get myself centered.
Yeah, put a little extra for me too, Casey. I need some.
You got it, Judith. It's really kind of there's never a short answer to a big question like that. The Condor and the Eagle, and I kind of gave Clement a bit of a hard time and said, don't you mean the eagle and the condor, you know? Because that's the way we are, to tease each other and to always try to have these little pieces of humor. We have been invested in joining the Condor and the Eagle's prophecy for my entire life, and to recognize it. I think I'm 72 now. So when I was very, very young, and our people had been relocated through another program that the federal government was using to try to assimilate us, then many of the Pangta, including myself and many of the other indigenous nations of the plains, ended up in cities. And so in the 50s, my family was relocated out into the West Coast. And the money was gone in an instant because they would allocate enough for you to live for 1 month. And then you're on your own and couldn't even make it back home. We ended up being migrant farm workers in the San Joaquin Valley. We had many cousins there. And as with all of our folks, we never were alone. If we needed a place to be, our relatives simply took us in, and we lived together until we could find another way. But living in the labor camp for a period of time out there in California was one of my happier memories, because I lived among the indigenous people coming from the Southern Hemisphere, coming from Central America, coming from that place called Mexico, which is in fact a part of us as well. That medicine line is just a stupid joke that these colonizers put on their own piece of paper to try to be more capable of stealing from us, from separating us, trying to make us feel as if we weren't one. But in our hearts and in our memories, our blood memories, that kinship has always been there. And as we grew into this world called activism, when I became a young mother, my brother Carter Camp, the leader of the American Indian movement, had a fine relationship with the Black Panthers, with Cesar Chavez, and with other people of color that also recognized the need to decolonize. And within our spirituality, we acknowledged that of course the eagle and the condor were dancing their dance. And of course, the red nations from the Arctic Circle down to the tip of Chile were joining spiritually and preparing ourselves for this time when the red nations were supposed to rise up and lead and teach how to be in harmony again. So struggles, yeah, oh well, you're tired, so what? It's just part of being human, that's all. Get over it, get on with it, and warrior up. That's something my poor little relative, Brian, has to hear all the time. Get over yourself. We got business to do here. Ha! Did you feel that? I just slapped that little cute cheek of yours. This is a powerful moment. He's adorable, isn't he? Look at those little dimples. Ah, goodness. So the condor and the eagle is to me the words for what we're already knowing in our heart and spirit. Simply put, thank you.
Cool. I was just poking fun at Brian. We have that sibling thing, and you get that. Wow, that was, I can never like speak about what the Condor and the Eagle means to me in that way, Casey. So like that was really affirming too, and very poetic and beautiful. But for me, you know, for me traveling to Ecuador and experiencing the jungle in that way was my encounter with the condor, you know, flying with it. And, you know, it was very spiritual sense, very like, I'm staying in Chihuahua land. So if you hear barking, that's what it is. But yeah, you know, that was my encounter, and it was also very kind of like very shifting in the ways that I was moving through the world and understanding what was happening around me, and like the big picture, so to speak, of, you know, my place in the world, and, you know, this moment in time. So it was definitely awakening to me, very shocking, you know, and kind of out of body experience where it's like, wow, I'm part of this bigger scheme of things, and I do play a role in this, and my story is valid, you know, in this way. And it's also felt throughout these communities. And you do feel that kinship, you know, it speaks to that. It's that awakening to realize that there is kinship amongst us in so many different ways. And that's what gives us power, you know, in the ways that we try to raise these issues and advocate for change and transitions in different ways. But yeah, that's sort of just what it means to me, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Judith, and thanks for joining us, Jaime. You know, I remember when I was growing up, it's like we would always like travel during the holidays to go see family, and most of the time it was in West Texas. It's like Big Spring, but you know, I started to realize, you know, different holidays we would go to other places. I was like, man, I got family like almost in every city. And, you know, whether it was Dallas or New Braunfels or San Marcos or San Antonio. And as we got older, it's like I started to meet other families. We took one trip one time to California, and we went west. And we had family in Albuquerque, in Moriarty, and then in Arizona somewhere too. And then all the way up the coast of California. And my dad had some friends in like the Bay Area. And then, you know, later on, it's like I realized, oh, I got family too in Oregon and in Colorado. It's like, wow. It's like we have relations all over the Southwest. And it wasn't until, you know, I really started thinking about, you know, our roots and our ancestry and our connectedness to this land. And, you know, of course we got family all over the Southwest, all the way up to, you know, Washington State. And, you know, even more recently, you know, I've been connecting with relatives south of the medicine line. And so, you know, when I think of like the condor and the eagle, or the eagle and the condor, it is very, very important for me, you know, to recognize that we are all related, and that, you know, even my relatives in Oklahoma, you know, it took visiting Casey during the the social forum, for me to even realize that and recognize that. So even though we don't have like direct lineage, we're still related. We're still family. We're still kin, and there are cultural bonds and spiritual bonds and other ways that we connect that go much deeper, and go further back in time than any of us can recognize or point to or say. So that's helped my understanding, and when I started doing this environmental work, there were indigenous representatives from Ecuador and Peru traveling to Houston to confront oil and gas companies at shareholder meetings or with executives of the corporations, because their lands were under threat, and they came to speak directly to the decision makers of the companies, and it's hard not to feel connected to them too, right? Even though they didn't speak English, they spoke Spanish, but they also spoke their native tongue, and there was just a natural familiarity, and a natural kinship again. So, and our experiences, right? Our experiences, the struggle that Casey mentioned, were also very similar. And how we responded to that struggle, I think, made me feel really strong and powerful. And it helped me understand what has been taken from us and what we've lost, so our songs, our ceremonies, have been, forcibly removed, by violence, by threat of violence. There's forced assimilation, all these things. And so this whole idea of the eagle and the condor, like for me, to sum it up in a word, is remembering, from my own personal experience, it's just remembering and acknowledging who my people are, where I come from, and then my obligations and duties that come along with that. So I'll end it there, yeah.
Yeah, and I can imagine that some of the manifestation of this prophecy happens during these global climate marches. What is the energy like when you're gathered with so many passionate souls around our earth and our rights? Judith, if you can take the first answer.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, being around so many passionate souls is intense because everybody has, different love for doing what they do. And, sometimes that's also very challenging, and it's hard work to build on relationships, which has been very important too. I think it's like the whole message of this film too is how we build relationships amongst borders, amongst, like throughout the world, to be able to build a stronger movement. So yeah, it feels like that's something that we gotta all figure out how to enhance. I don't know. I'm blanking out a little bit.
Brian, if you could tell us your experience in those climate marches.
There's a way of engaging in this work that is very much rooted in like this nonprofit kind of world, and I think what the marches have been useful for is bringing large numbers of people together, and it's a celebration, right? It's a joyful event. It's something that makes you feel really good, but there's a lot of work that goes into making those events happen, and then making sure that there's some follow-up, right? That there's some action and there's some longevity to that celebration so that it's not just a party, right? There's a lot of resources that are spent and time spent going to these marches. So, you know, the really hard part is translating that into some tangible outcomes. But I'll say, you know, there's a really powerful point in the film. It's at the very beginning, and you know, there are just moments, I think, when you're in large crowds and groups of people that are aligned with you, that support you, that have your back, right? And they're from all over the country and many times all over the world, you know, and they're in their own personal dress, right? And you know, being in Times Square at that moment when you know, everyone just kind of got quiet and then, you know, started to shout, "We're still here, we're still here, we're still here." It's like there's no way to explain the range of emotions that come out in a moment like that. And you know, and to bear witness to that and to see other Indigenous people experience that and recognize, you know, the struggles that we've faced, that we've overcome, and the most important point, that we're still here. You know, we may look and dress like you, but we are of this land, and that's a really important thing to recognize. And it means something, right? It means something. And there should be, you know, some listening that happens to folks that are of this land. And, you know, that those moments have the opportunity to make those situations happen in a really big way, you know? And so I'm really glad that there's a small piece in the film that captures some of that. A lot of it is just sort of unsaid. You know, you have to use your imagination a little to really understand the impact, but you see it in Casey's face and you see it in Melina's face, right? It's like, yeah.
Casey, we'd love to hear from you.
It feels like winning. It feels like power. It feels like kinship. It feels like finally. It feels like awareness. It feels like from the time that you are young and brown and in their world, that they're finally getting the message that all this time they've been on stolen land. All this time they've been fed the same lies as we've been fed. All this time they've been sleeping while we've been awake. And they're beginning to wake up. So it's joyous. It's power. It's a firm understanding that what the prayers have led us to is bearing fruit. Sha.
Thank you. So this event was intended to fall in line with one of the exhibits currently hosted in our partnering art museum. The Hostile Terrain Project focuses on the journey migrants have made and the terrible policies that have sadly killed them in these Mexico-US border crossings. I want to hear a brief discussion on the historical struggles Indigenous people have faced in their homelands and why that forces them to migrate. Brian, would you like to get started? You're like, no.
Muting their microphone. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really poignant question, and I think a lot of folks who may have grown up in the States might not think of themselves as migrants, right? But if you move from one city to another city, you're a migrant, man. If you move at all, and particularly if you move because your socioeconomic conditions force you to move. And that did happen to my family many times. Oftentimes it's like every generation, you have to move, you have to follow, you got to follow the herd, right? It just looks different these days. The herd is where the work is, where the job is, wherever you can live and provide for yourself and your family. So my parents are from West Texas, both of them, and my mother's side, when she grew up, were farm workers. And, my grandpa was a migrant farm worker, right? So his work forced him to migrate all over the country and pick fruit and vegetables and cotton. And my dad, his family's from West Texas, and they lived in more of like an urban part of the area in a town called Big Spring. And it was, this petro kind of city that was on top of the Permian Basin, which continues to produce, oil and gas to this day. And so when that industry kind of, crumbled in the 80s, and even a little bit before that, and if you did not want to, be in that industry, or if you were excluded from that industry, you had to go somewhere else, right? So my parents migrated to Houston, and that's where I was raised and grew up. But I think every generation has their own migration story, and we like to, in this country, right, or they like to, this country likes to paint a picture of these destitute peasants from south of the medicine line, who are coming here for a better life. But often what's left out of that story is the devastation that this country has caused, on those other places, right? Which we saw in the film. Which is another important reason why this, this film is really special for me. And not just in this way, right, with environmental extractive industries, but through mega farms, and other mining things, or war, right? So on and on. But I just, I think it's important for all of us to understand, like, many of us are migrants, many forced, right, through no option, no other options.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue into the next comment that I have. So I wanted to touch on the phrase that the US is a nation of immigrants. It's so problematic to hear that because it erases the people who have always been here, and it doesn't acknowledge the destruction done to these people and to the lands. With this, I want to talk about the rights of nature. Casey, if you could please tell us about that and what the EPA has recently done on environmental regulatory rights.
Okay, do we have about 24 hours to do this? Because I think it'll take about that long.
No, I know.
So let me see how I can jump through this one. So yeah, we were here. So in many ways, this idea of being a nation of immigrants is very true. And at the same time, a person needs to acknowledge that, as my young one said here, we also migrated. In our original territory, we had 18 villages that we migrated around to, depending on the timing of the year, on the sources of food, and many other things. So all of these things play into what brings us to today. And we, you know, even those folks that come from Europe, they had original ways of their own. And they migrated for sure when they came upon these shores using the doctrine of discovery to be ugly. But, you know, maybe their people weren't that way to begin with. They just ended up ugly. I don't know. So because of the manner in which we've had to survive, and I do feel very blessed to survive. You know, my mother was of the first generation to be born in captivity on a reservation, unable to leave. My grandfather was aide on the forestry removal. So my mother's memories come from a time of freedom, and her ways came from that understanding of sovereignty. And even though that wasn't part of our language, you know, we have incorporated many of the meanings in their 5 treaties with the Ponca people, every one of them abrogated. And then we end up in this abject poverty in their mind. We didn't actually have that understanding ourselves because we had each other, you know, and we always felt good about ourselves. But the political ways of moving through this was always an upstream battle, because the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is ridiculous even in its name, but it was started under the War Department, and they were determined to destroy us. That was why they were created, was to finish us off. If the smallpox blankets didn't do it, if the forced removals didn't do it, they made policy after policy after policy. When you come to a person that has accepted decolonization as the truth, then you have to start dealing with them from a different place. And that's kind of where I was when I went into the council for my tribe 4 years ago. Never choosing to do that, but I listened to my family. I listened to my elders. I listened to the youth. And they wanted that position. So when I got in there, we immediately created a resolution within 2 months to put a moratorium on fracking and injection wells in our territory. They are bound that they are supposed to deal with us on a nation-to-nation basis. The Bureau of Indian Affairs didn't know what to do with it. And they have to abide by what our council says in our territory. So that's still in place. We put a resolution in support of Standing Rock. My sons were there and in a leadership position, Mikasi and Jeff. And of course, I had the fun of getting arrested up there, put in a dog cage, the joys of being Indigenous. And the support of that, support of the treaty of KXL, that is with over 100 Indigenous nations to stop that. My son planting the sacred corn. We are never succumbing to allowing these fools to take us on their suicidal rant, you know. They really want to continue this gas and oil business to the extermination of their own species. But we don't want to go down that road. So, you know, going to Ecuador, where they had put this rights of nature into their constitution and trying to understand how that could be a useful tool in our territory. I'm just going to fast forward very quickly through all of the different ways, going, you know, to the Maori people and seeing how they recognize the rights of the Wanganui River. Seeing citizens within this occupied territory called the United States, trying to find a way to protect themselves. We, utilizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, plus coming from our own place of sovereignty, put in place a statute, and I'm trying to find the way forward to put it into our Constitution. That is very simple to me. as a water protector, as a land defender, as a mama, grandma, great-grandma, sister, auntie, granddaughter, great-granddaughter. That we're not here protecting nature, we are nature protecting itself. And when one recognizes that and internalizes that in the deepest portion of oneself, then one learns that there must be a way to use their words, bring them into our courts, and to make them be responsible for their ugly ways. Rights of nature.
Thank you so much. So one of my favorite phrases in the film was when we hear Ecuadorian union member Donald Montecayo say, ellos tienen tanta plata para defenderse y nosotros tenemos la verdad para acusarlos, when referring to Texaco, meaning they have a lot of money to defend themselves and what we have is the truth to charge them with. Indigenous communities have to battle against billion-dollar industries and entire governments. How does each one of you strengthen your will and spirit when these are your enemies?
Oh my God. I literally just like today was asking myself this very question, because I'm about to go up against Valero just by myself, and they have millions of dollars to pay for lawyers to just say that my truth, these impacts, these health impacts are just my own doing, and they have nothing to do with it, you know, and they have nothing to do with assuming responsibility. So I want to hear what we can all do. I need to hear what I can do to reinforce my spirit and my rage, you know, to be able to re-empower myself to know that I do have power, you know, and I did speak to someone today that helped me sort of figure that out, you know, and realize that there is some power even within just us, the individual, and, you know, our commitment to the truth. You know, this is my truth, and what is happening to our communities, to our bodies, to our air is very real and is, you know, is the truth. And no matter how many lawyers they pay, you know, they're going to pay spiritually or physically, but at some point, you know, they're going to be accountable. And I think that my rage gives me, and that's the answer right there. Like my rage, I'm so pissed off that I'm going to use that rage to be able to hold my ground, you know, and remember that I do have some power and my own like tenacity to want to get, you know, my truth validated in some way. So
Your age, yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, Brian.
Sorry, I had a couple of windows open. I think that the most powerful part, you know, is just the fact that they even have to address us in the first place, right? So depending on your own personal situation, if you're a tribal member, yeah, they have to address your nation as another sovereign nation. That doesn't mean they're going to do it, but that's what's supposed to happen, right? If you grew up in a situation like Judith and I, you know, it's important to recognize that our elders and ancestors fought for similar types of recognition, right? As marginalized communities, protected classes, you know, Mexican American, African American, so on, indigenous communities, you know, in urban centers. And knowing that you still have power, you know, even without political or state recognized power, but just as a human being, if you show up in a good way with those facts, because of the way humanity works, you will have an audience and you will have people supporting you. And that, you know, has taken shape in many different ways in my life. And it starts even, you know, in your school, in your classroom, as a young person, you know, to assert your power in a good way is really, really a beautiful part of just being alive and being a human. And, you know, I've been to shareholder meetings where you have the opportunity to speak to the owners, right? Or the board of directors, like the folks who are actually making decisions in front of all their shareholders, all the folks that they're supposed to be listening to and accountable to. In the film, you saw us at city council, you know, and there's history, right? There are documents, court documents, city council minutes, you know, whatever entity you're going up against, like there is a written record of these fights and these battles, and history will recognize, you know, the true heroes in these fights, and you know, regardless of the outcome in your own personal situation, I think what's most important for me is that you're fighting on the right side of history, and that you're doing it because you care so much about those that are coming up behind you, whether it's your kids or, you know, your relatives' kids or your neighbors' kids. But that's enough for me, you know, that's enough. And that eases my rage and my anger, because I know that I'm right? And if you look at remember the folks from Ecuador, like there's just this calmness and this peace in their heart and the way they express themselves. Patricia, you know, and I think the person who said it was one of the lawyers in the film. But yeah, so it's important not to let that rage take over, right? Because then they win, right? Like you're out of control, and you have no personal power. They take your power away from you with that rage. So I'll leave it there, and I'll say that, you know, a lot of what has helped me sort of understand that is listening to elders, and also I'm drawing a blank right now, but he was a radio host with AIM and a poet. Help me out, Casey. John Trudell. Yeah, your mic was off, but I could just read your lips. Yeah, just beautiful ways of like expressing like genuine love, right? In these moments of rage and extreme oppression.
Yeah, thank you. Casey, we'd like to see how you strengthen your will and spirit against these enemies.
Yeah, one thing, Judith, when he speaks of Trudell, I was thinking about Trudell talking to these settlers one time. And he said a phrase that's always stayed with me. He said, "And yet you expect our anger to be benign." No, I love rage. It's just one of my favorite feelings when I'm dealing with them, because I have that rage for my mother. I have that rage for my brothers, for my daddy, for my companion, for my children and grandchildren. I have that rage for the smallpox blankets that took my people down to 200. I have that rage because the sacred waters, the water herself that sustains us all, is being defiled. So it's one of my favorite things. I feel real good about it. And the thing that I really love is to really examine what is power. Because people ask that all the time. Oh, what do you think about this David and Goliath thing, you know? Well, first of all, I'm not a Christian, so none of that means much to me. But our ceremonies sustain me. Burning that cedar right then got me ready. Holding my sage got me ready, you know, and all of the entities of the spirit nation that is around me, the ancestors, they've been priming this pump for a long time. I feel their power and I ask for help. Help me, just help me, please. Set a path, set a direction, and I'll just follow it. That's all I have to do. I don't even have to clear the way. I just follow that path that's set in front of me. And I got to understand very clearly that those foolish ones that have the false sense of their fake stuff, like that paper money that they create and those plastic cards that we all use, have no reality to it. But that tomato plant that I grow, that's power. That sacred tree that drops the nuts and grows the fruits, oh my goodness, that's power. That's giving life. Those forelegs, those coyotes howling outside out here, and the deer running in front of them, and the buffalo nation. That's power, that's power, that's power. That water that moves rocks, that crashes the shores, that builds the hurricane, tornadoes, those are power. That fire that's purifying, that's power. The winds, the Father, Son, without which we would none of us be here if it didn't rise in the morning. The Moon Mother that controls the entire rhythms of life. That's power. Those pitiful ones that are like lemmings jumping off a cliff to a suicidal way of life. Pity them, teach them, give them truth, pray for their generations to come. Because as my little relative here says, we're on the correct side of history. And I know I was taught all my life that truth has a power of its own. So when you tell your truths, just like I did to you just now, you could feel it. It has a power of its own. And that's power, Judith. Fill yourself with it. Take a deep breath. Feel the warmth of the sun. You're a woman. You're a woman. You got it all.
Thank you. I am duality.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that's partially going to help, or significantly going to help answer my next question. So we're in the year 2020 and ecocide has not yet been accepted as an internationally punishable crime by the United Nations. Clearly, it is not a priority for them, and we can't wait for these international entities to condemn the obvious destruction. What do you think it is going to take for the damage to the planet and species to be legally criminalized and punished? Or should we not even hope for that to manifest and just keep using that power you talked about to keep fighting? Casey, would you like to? Okay, go ahead. Whoever wants to go first.
I don't know. It's just, that's so much to think about, because we want to be able to hold all of these industries accountable legally in so many ways, but they make it so hard, and we have to figure out how our own stories can be validated as the truth, which is, it's absurd, and we have to deal with a very absurd system. And I'm now realizing, well, not now realizing, but like learning how to use their language against them, because that's also a task and so much work to be able to interpret what they're trying to keep us out of, and then also how they're trying to keep us down. So I'm trying to figure out how to outsmart this situation that we found ourselves in, and that's a hard question to answer. And I'm gonna make just space for someone, if they have the answer, to feel free to share. But I just wanted to let you know that was.
Thank you, Judith.
I'm going to go ahead here because, you know, I'm hearing you talk about using their language, but I heard you two young ones start off your whole conversation with, I'm tired. What's that about?
Tired in the sense of
what is that about? Oh, get over it. Get over it.
Yeah, I love you, Casey.
Yeah, just get over it. And if you want to use those words and that language, then use those words and that language to say what you want to be, who you really are. Use those words and that language to build yourself and to recognize yourself. And when you do that and you accept that about yourself, you quit putting it out in the universe and giving yourself any kind of excuses, because that's just silly and it holds you back, you know. Words have power, as we both know, all of us know. Words have power, and whatever language that we choose to speak in, even that internal language where we're talking to us, yeah, that has power. So yeah, it's understandable. I'm not saying that nobody feels that, but you can't continue to express it out into the universe and allow it to grow in such a way. Yeah. Just go ahead and power up and say that you are that, because you can be and you will be and you are as you grow, as you grow. As far as the words ecocide, you know, we have a lot of those. We use pesticides, we use insecticides, we use aquacide, we use all of these different forms of sides. Suicide. There's 1,000 things that all of us are experiencing within our communities that are creating a situation that is going to allow the human to remove itself from this sacred system of life. For those of us who are awake and aware, you know, the tools that we utilize are the things like tonight, this web of life. We call it a webinar. But we're talking to other people out there, and this film is talking to other people out there who are going to begin to recognize their own truths and their own powers. And maybe there are ways that each of us can continue to help us all understand that we're not separate from nature, that we're part of it. That's why rights of nature, I think, can be a powerful tool to do that, to hold those accountable, those corporations accountable, to hold the generations past who have brought us to this point accountable by recognizing the rights of the water, recognizing. And so many places like along Lake Erie, over 200,000 people, we're going to recognize the rights of Lake Erie as a tool to help the clean water be in their own neighborhoods. And so I look for things like that, municipalities, those of my young relative, Brian, who can recognize that if the sovereignty is exerted among the indigenous peoples, that it protects all the neighbors, right? So whenever we begin to really work within our kitchen table organizing, our neighborhood organizing, or going to the city councils as these young people have, and say, we want you to start looking at a statute or a law that we call rights of nature. And I want you to look at it in the framework that as a protection from the extractive industry, the fossil fuel industry, the plastics industries, or whatever it might be, and see if it might be a fit for you. There's no reason why we are confined to allow those so-called lawmakers to make laws that are against the laws of nature, against the natural laws. But rather we have to find ways to enhance the natural laws within that framework of their words and that structure that they have tried to put in place. Meanwhile, building our own structure of power.
Thank
I'm
you.
down with all that.
So now I want to talk filmmaking and art. It is so beautiful to see brilliant Indigenous communities be the feature in this documentary. And this film highlights some of the work that is being done. How has this particular film impacted Indigenous youth? And I want us to imagine a film that, since its inception, is 100% Indigenous made. What kind of angle do you think this would take? And what would you love to see in it?
Ooh, well, I'll go. And I don't know what impact it's had on like Indigenous youth yet, but I know what I hope happens, and I hope that more Indigenous youth have the opportunity, right, to tell their own story, and it's been a big part of work that I've tried to do myself, and it's still, there's so many barriers, but there are many ways to tell our own story, right? We don't need to always use the platforms and the media that are part of this Western culture. So many of the things that like Casey mentioned with ceremonies and songs and traditions, like that's already happening, right? So for me, I feel like one thing that I have seen is more urban Indigenous youth connect with those other ways of telling their story and connecting to their story, by seeing more Indigenous people express themselves, unashamedly, proudly, and see them, they're spirit filled and to be happy and proud, all of those things. So I think that's a very important part for me to recognize, because we would all love for people, right, to have the equipment, and the experience and the time to be able to put a film together. Yes, we need to get there, and I think in the coming years, like I already know a lot of youth that are beginning to use these platforms and mediums to do that. Music, of course, even prior to film. But I think it's just as important for us to think about those other ways of telling our story. They don't have to be, broadly televised or put out to the public, but that there's a really important part in telling your story, even within your own family, and that takes a little harder work to do, but I see that happening. I'd be curious to know what you had said. So I remember I was watching the film on the platform, and someone really commented on the song, right, that y'all wrote on the boat.
You took my question, Brian.
Oh. But like, that's a way of them telling their story, right? And that's totally like Indigenous led and by the youth. So
Yes. And thank you for reminding us that we don't have to use the same means, because for hundreds of years, we have our own art, we have our own storytelling and different things. So that was a great reminder. And Judith, please tell us about the beautiful song we heard.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to respond to Brian too, of the many ways that, we try to figure out how to weave our stories into the public, or not, to share with everyone, to affirm each other. And it's important for these new generation of kids to see, you know, that we're all interweaved into each other's stories, and indigeneity is a big part of who we are, and migration is also a big part of who we are. And that's how we start to understand the world around us, you know, through our language, our ceremonies, traditions, songs, and arts, you know, and I feel all of that. But yeah, this song, that's exactly what it was. You know, we were bored in this this little tiny boat for 6 hours in the river, and we just got on top of the roof of the little boat and started just playing songs. And then these two really cool musicians, really good friends of mine now, and they had this cumbia song they had written together, and they kind of shifted the lyrics, and we all kind of wrote it together. And the young people that were there, these young kids, you know, were hanging out and writing the song together, and we all came up with the beat, and it was so sweet. It was such a beautiful moment of, you know, us across borders getting together on this trip and just making something together really beautifully. And, you know, singing together was just an affirmation of how we can be in tune together in such a beautiful, like, sporadic type of way. But it's that kinship that we feel towards one another that comes easy, you know, to build these networks and enlaces and these, you know, redes, these webs.
And I just have to say, like, have you ever heard like an American song with this sound?
Oh yeah, he threw that in there, you know, those the cumbia kings like coming through.
It's like, who would think to put a parrot in the, you know, in the song? It's like, and it just works so perfectly. It's like
That's awesome. And I want to hear, I heard the word hope. So what hopes did you all have as this film was being released, and the hopes you continue to hold for it?
You mean like the hopes in coming out of the film, or just in general in life? Because there's
The
just
hopes
so
of the film, the impact of the film.
yeah, I think that, you know, this work is a way of life. It's not just something that, you know, you want to put in a film and just have this one expectation. I think it's trying to turn something in someone's head to, you know, understand that we are interconnected in some way, and there is solidarity between all of that, and trying to figure out ways to hold each other through a lot of these shifts and changes that we're going to be seeing because of what you saw in the film, not just climate change, but like just all the crimes of these industries that get away with so much if we let, you know, things get out of control, and we don't focus on the ways that we need to keep our country safe and our people safe, you know.
Casey, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, there's no easy answer to any of that. I think that storytelling takes many forms. And in this particular form of documentary making, I don't believe any of us thought that years later we would still be doing these Q&As, and that there would still be an audience that was watching these shows and wanting to know more. I think that the reason that we continue is that there is always hope. And when there's life, there's hope. And at this time, all things are living within the natural laws except humans. And so those of us who remember and understand that have the joy and the honor of saying the words out loud and helping humans to realize that by changing a very few things, And that's like renewable energies instead of fossil fuel energies. We can go ahead and be our little creatures of comfort and be warm in the winter and cool in the summer, have a refrigerator, and at the same time, participate in the healing of the one true mother we all share, our Mother Earth, because she sustains us unconditionally. And we saw during this terrible, sad time of COVID, when we're seeing humans all around us, sickly and pitiful, of our people, our brown people, being the ones that are the most susceptible right now for any number of reasons you all can recognize. That we also saw that when we sat back for a period of time and didn't fly around and drive around, and that the earth, she began to heal. The waters began to heal, the airs began to heal. And so now, when the stories come out and we talk to one another, can you imagine if all humans had that sense of awareness? I believe that one of the things that my brother Cart said that stuck with me one time, because the Department of Energy had targeted Indigenous peoples to take waste. And they were trying to give the Ponca and others $1 million to take nuclear waste into our reservations, and told us it was safe. Don't worry about it. You know, they know we're poor. So here's $1 million. Can you imagine what you could do with it for your people? And brother started a campaign and enlisted all of us. And I asked him, you know, how is this going to go, brother? You know, we're in a mode of survival every day. We don't even have time to think about environmental stuff because we're just trying to eat that day. We're just trying to figure out a place and a way to live, you know. And he said, sister, I know for sure that 99% of the time, truly informed people make the right decision. That's my hope, is that if we inform enough people, they're going to make the right decision.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned awareness, Casey, right now, as you were talking about hope, the hope that people will wake up. And in turn, I've been seeing a lot of people that want to return to their ancestors and retake Indigenous way of life. And I have a question that's going to be phrased a little differently for Brian and Judith, but Casey, we know taking a DNA test is not enough or appropriate to call yourself Native American. What advice do you give to those that have this endeavor and can be claimed by a tribe and those that cannot?
I actually thought about taking DNA test, me and my husband, because I was thinking, you know, I have some Irish ancestors and I'm probably a Irish princess somewhere in my background, you know. Maybe I could claim a castle or two on that island over there.
That's brilliant.
It has occurred to me. Sometimes it's kind of funny to me in some ways, you know, because part of the colonizers' way of trying to destroy us was by using these things, these CDIB cards that we all carry, certified degree of Indian blood, right? Well, first of all, I'm not Indian. I'm Ponca. Ponca abade, mashte Ponca, Ponca wa'u. I'm a woman that comes from the Ponca Nation. I know who I am. I'm very blessed that way. And I don't believe that any of us has to fall for this nonsense of having to prove who we are. We carry that ancestral knowledge within our cellular makeup, and it doesn't go away. It might get confused by the nonsense that's put into our heads, but our hearts know, our spirits know. And so we simply reclaim who we are by being us and by recognizing first ourselves and then each other. You know, I've had these nonsensical arguments even with Brian way back in the day, some 10 years ago probably, and he's like, oh, I don't know who my people are. And I was like, oh, get over that too, Brian. You're indigenous, man. You know, because somebody's messed with you, somebody has tried to tell you that you have to prove who you are. Nah, that's silliness. That's accepting that colonization and internalizing it and then using it, you know. And instead of that, feel yourself, know yourself, be comfortable with yourself. And you don't have to claim a particular blood or a particular nation to be able to say, I'm indigenous to the red quadrant of the earth. I belong to the prophecy of the Condor and the Eagle, and I'm whole, I'm complete. I know who I am because I could feel it in my spirit, and I'm connected to all that is. Yeah, it's not even hard. It's that simple.
Oh, Casey, that's amazing because that's partially the answer I was looking to get from Brian and Judith. So I wanted to ask you, Brian and Judith, that what words, in addition to what Casey just said, so a lot of us have, are far displaced from our indigenous culture, and she said it perfectly. We do know who we are, but there's often the struggle to try to justify, or sometimes, insensitively say, oh yes, I'm an Aztec princess and so forth. So can you talk about that? Different indigenous that want to reconnect, but there's so much displacement between, their ancestors and the now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I grapple with that a lot, actually, because I'm like all kinds of ways mixed in so many different ways that I don't even know where to start, how to narrow down my indigeneity. On my father's side, we're Afro-Mexican, and on my mother's side, I am indigenous from the deep deserts of San Luis Potosí, and trying to narrow down where my ancestors coming from Europe mixed with the indigenous people of that region, it just, I have to go through the timeline, and at some point I am gonna, I don't know, gather the courage to get a DNA test, because that freaks me out. Quite honestly, I don't know what they're going to do with my information after they have it, and how they're going to place me. But
don't do it.
I don't know, but going through the timeline is also a lot of work, and trying to research where my family comes from and how we migrated, because we are migrant people. And I think when it comes to us, who've been completely displaced from our original cultures and things like that, we do see that throughout our childhood, throughout our family's life, the ways that they have different remedios, for different things, and the ways they make their tea, or the ways they cook their tacos. And that tells me a lot of who I am, and the kinds of people that I come from. And I know I come from land-based people, and people who know how to work the lands and take care of the lands, and know how to survive and honor that, that kinship and that collective need. So yeah, I think that the ways that we identify ourselves to be indigenous or migrant, I consider myself a migrant person, because I'm going to narrow it down to all of my Indigenous identities, and I'm pretty sure that we migrated. So that's what I can say about who I am. And I think that, that also acknowledges all of the other cultures that, my ancestors come from, and how they've moved. So I think we're all on the same journey, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out who we are. And I don't actually like to dive into the politics of how Latino you are or how Indigenous you are based on how you dress or how you speak, because we're all mixed in so many different ways, and we're mixes of generations as well. We're not just Indigenous and ranchero, we're also punk rock and Evo and soul and all of these beautiful mix of cultures, because we are migrant people, and our ancestors and our parents migrated, and we've had to assimilate or integrate into the cultures that welcomed us in. So there's also something to say about that. I think that we can accept each other as we are, and create these nations of cultures amongst ourselves too. And I think acceptance and also a lot of patience and learning and growth are going to require or be a requirement for us to be able to work through figuring out who and where we come from, and how we want to acknowledge those ancestors, because we're all also of European descent in so many ways, and there's parts of our ancestors and family structures that also contributed to a lot of fuckery all over the world. And so we also got to acknowledge that and make peace, and figure out how to work with reparations even within our own families. I know there's as a Mexican American woman, as a Latina, as an Indigenous woman, I deal with a lot of anti-Blackness in my family, and my father is very Black, and so it's just like so many different things that we also need to heal within our own structures and our own families and communities.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think Casey has to jump off and get on another call, but before I go, if she had any final thoughts that she'd like to share before she leaves us, and we can continue.
I'm way thoughty, so I'll try not to to keep on this webinar too long. What is my happiness is seeing folks of your age and your generation that are not going through all of the same stuff as some of us had to in growing up. Your parents and grandparents are my generation. And it felt like it took us a bit. Felt kind of like, walking in some quicksand for a while with some heavy boots on. And it now feels much better. And to see the ability of all of you to gather and to organize and to take on leadership positions is the true hope. And I honor you. Thank you for letting me be among you.
An immense thank you, Casey. Thank you so much.
Yes. I always am reminded how little I know whenever I'm on a panel with Casey, and I think it's such an important reminder, why intergenerational conversations and work is necessary. Yeah, but to answer your question, it's like I think I want to join Casey. I think I have some great ancestry, Neanderthal ancestry. So I think we should, form a group and go reclaim our land over in Europe. But I've thought about that question a lot, and just listening to Casey on this call, I was thinking, a big part of our problem or my own personal problem is that I still continue to think within the confines of this culture and this system, right? And that could mean like, you know, the legal system, you know, and thinking of identity in terms of, you know, how this nation thinks of us, right? Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, Mexican American, Chicano, all of these things. And, you know, maybe the right answer is to just like remove all of that and really keen in on the natural laws, right? So back to the rights of nature, back to the natural laws that are universal, regardless of who you are or where you came from. And it's such a liberating way to think about yourself, right? Because I don't have to know which country I'm from, what the laws are of that country, what the rules are. It's like the rules are the natural rules. And that's true wherever you are. And in that respect, you know, everyone is indigenous. We all come from this planet. And I think that's the beautiful thing about taking off those national layers and identities. And that doesn't mean that you can't be proud of who you connect with, right? The language that you speak, the food that you eat, all of those things, the songs that you sing, the clothes that you wear. But that shouldn't guide everything about you. And your reference point should be, you know, the natural laws that exist, that govern all of us here. So I don't know what the right answer is, but it's definitely, you know, a journey that is an important one for any young person to think about, and just having these conversations, you know, is new. It's something completely new. Like the only reference I remember in like grade school all the way up to 8th grade on like the indigenous ancestry was, I think it was 3rd grade. And I remember they brought in like these like corn cobs, and the corn was all like different colors. And I'd never seen like a corn like with different colors, right? And it was just like a prop. It wasn't like real corn either. But it was one lesson, one day for like 30 minutes on how people lived here before Europeans came. And like, it was like the coolest. It's like, I still remember, I know what seat I was sitting in. I know the chalkboard they were at, where the teacher was standing. And I remember, you know, the 3 different types of corn they had. It's like, but yeah, and it came into focus, right? It's like, I like this. It's like, I want to learn more about this, but that was it. That's all we got.
No one told you you're part of the maize people.
It spoke to me, right? So when Casey talks about like that cellular memory and, you know, it's in your blood, it's like, it's so there. So when you're on the right path, you know, it just like speaks to you. You feel it, you know it's right.
So I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker because I am taking a lot of your time, and everyone tuning in, thank you so much. It's just, I can't stop getting answers from our panelists. It's wonderful. So recent developments for our peoples include defending water rights, like in the Mexican state of Chihuahua, where farmers are demanding from Mexico that they stop diverting water for the United States from La Boquilla Dam, right? And then Casey talked to us about the situation in Oklahoma. And just this week, they assassinated environmental activist Arnold Joaquin Morazan Erazo in Honduras. In Houston, we saw the intense petrochemical flames this week as well. It's truly disheartening, but our resilience is very much fighting against all of this. And all of you have been around the world witnessing the different wins for Indigenous communities. Currently, where do you see environmental justice growing organically and significantly?
yeah, I think that there are, I guess that is what gives me hope, in terms of like what we're seeing just shape up after all of these things, not necessarily this one particular film initiating all of that, but like the thing that led to a series of events that created all of these relationships, where these young people are organically just wanting to reconnect to their cultural identity, their campesino parents, and they wanted to also heal that relationship to the land, that they didn't get to have because their parents, were campesinos and doing all the hard labor of being in, out in the ways that they were trying to gain. I'm sorry, I blank out and trying to get it together. But
because you're tired.
but I'm also like, I'm so deep into it that I'm like, wait, there's so much information I'm seeing.
Hopefully your soul will send the vibes to us and then we'll understand. So no pressure. Yeah, Brian, do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, and tell me the question again. I was trying to put video up of the flare, but it's not going to work. I was focused on
the way that the EJ is like organically manifesting. So I was gonna share that like these young people are just making all of these beautiful things, these gardens, and tending all of these projects around land in Houston, and so that is connected to the ways that Brian and I engaged with community, and the ways that like media played a big role, and what we do, filming the flares and things like that. Like they took that to heart and created their own narratives and stories around that, and the impacts that has on their communities, and them like trying to build up solutions to challenge that. I think that's
yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, I think just going off of what Judith said, we spent a lot of our time documenting the crimes, right, and understanding the impact and the harm. I think where the EJ and our elders, like Casey's generation, helped develop the entire framework to begin with, right? And that was built on their ancestors, came before them. What I see next is the youth really coming up with the solutions, right? Where we need to go next to heal the land, to fix the land, to live with the land in a more harmonious way, sustainably. And that's, not coming out of nowhere, right? I think each generation has been trying to do all of the above. But we're at a moment now where we really need everyone to focus on healing the land and living correctly, living right with it. So the gardens and things that Judith mentioned, like that's really powerful and important, right? And I said my mother and her parents were farm workers, but they were farm workers at a moment when mass agriculture was changing too, right? They were using fertilizers, pesticides, and like draining, sucking all of the water out of the aquifers, which will disappear. Oglala Aquifer is not a recharged aquifer. Once that water's gone, it's gone, right? So we can't continue to do things the same way, and that's where we're at. So the environmental justice movement will continue to transform. We've seen the emergence of the climate justice movement. I would say that that's an extension of the environmental justice movement, with a focus on how climate has changed. And my battery died, so I'm gonna have to switch cameras here. But yeah, I think it's not for me to say, but it's for them to figure out themselves, and hopefully we can help make whatever they choose easier, whether that's, with resources, with knowledge, with support, whatever is asked of us.
Right. Well, it has been a great pleasure talking with each one of you. And I mean, as Casey was talking, there were moments where I couldn't hold back tears, but then her joy and her power was just so uplifting. So we continue in the struggle and trust the ancestral knowledge, right? And our kin to enable us to thrive and defend our planet. I would love for each one of you to send us off with a few words calling us to action, and then we will call it a night. So Judith, if you could go first.
Sorry, I had so many windows open, and then thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm so sorry. I'm just not having the best day today of, trying to get my mind straight around all of these things, and I'm just blacking out almost. But no, I think that the things that we want to call people to action is, being aware and being aware of the ways that Indigenous people are fighting across the US, but also all over the world. I know that Clem has shared some of the videos that Patricia Walinga was sending a message from the Amazon, and what she was imploring us to do, in the ways that we need to be more aware of how we're contributing to all of these problems, and what we need to keep in mind to keep it going. But right now, I think that there's so many things even just happening here in the US where we call home in different areas. I mean, I know that there's folks fighting in the border of the O'odham Nation, and that's a good way for folks to plug in, and sending donations, or you being there and being present, because there's a lot of things that are happening there that are going to affect everyone else in the same way. But it's a call to action, it's solidarity, and I think that's a good way to start right now. But yeah, folks can donate to defend Autumn Joed, and I can share it on the chat as well.
Yes,
and
please do.
just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Brian.
Just quickly, continue to be safe, protect yourself, and be well. We're still in the midst of a global pandemic. And I know that a lot of people are struggling financially, struggling with the inability to, have the perceived sort of freedom to go to restaurants and bars and shopping centers and such. But we're not, constrained with being present and actually, being there for those that you love in your family, in your close family. And so, take the lessons that this moment is offering us to heart, and support those that you can, who are struggling, and that all of the same battles, that we had before this time are still there, and in some instances they're even worse, exacerbated. So be kind. I know that there are moments when we feel tired, when we are frustrated, when we're angry, and we feel like we have no power. But I'm so glad that Casey, was here to remind us that we still have our power, and we still have, our energy, and we just have to acknowledge it, right? And manifest it. So like Taha says, she's the elder in Vancouver, says warrior up and keep fighting. And we'll see you tomorrow and the next day.
Definitely wonderful. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in, and best wishes for everyone. And we keep the struggle going. We're strong. Thank you.
And thank you, Fernanda, and thank you, Tonantzin Society, Cristina, y todo. Ciao.
Thank you for having us, y'all. Yeah, have a good night.
Thank you all. Likewise. Bye, everyone.